thank you so much for joining me. I've been really looking forward to this conversation since our initial chat. And yeah, I think I'm excited to see where it takes us. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited as well. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I often ask people who I speak to where they are, just because I feel very fortunate that the people I speak to literally are just dotted around the world. And so before we go any further, just where are you right now? Can our listeners picture you?
I'm calling from Omaha, Nebraska. And if you're not familiar with the US, it's about in the very middle. I actually refer to Omaha sometimes as the middle of everywhere. There's probably some people that refer to it as the middle of nowhere, but it's a nice sunny weekday here in Omaha. It's a nice spring day here. So that's where I'm calling in from.
Nice. So I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and I can't actually picture, but I think you must be pretty much straight below where I grew up. Obviously, we were on the border of the US because the middle of Canada would be absolutely freezing, but it was still pretty freezing. But it was the same thing. It's sort of in the middle of, well, we did say in the middle of nowhere because it really was just like, or is just sort of like a splat. When you fly in, it's just kind of like a blah, and there's nothing, and there's Winnipeg.
Up to an area called the Boundary Waters this weekend, which is right on the border with Canada and really is kind of the middle of nowhere. But it's a beautiful, beautiful area.
Beautiful. Yeah. I know the lake regions. I grew up canoeing and camping and portaging. I mean, I have not done that it's like another lifetime ago. I do miss it, but yeah, very different here in Brazil. So yeah, if you could just tell us a little bit about the work you've spent the last 25 years doing in the space that you work in, just to provide a little bit of context for our listeners.
For almost the last 25 years, I've been doing work that's generally referred to as DEI. Now, when I first got into the work, I think we generally referred to it as D&I, which was diversity and inclusion. And there wasn't even a lot of discussion about inclusion when I first got involved in the work. And then equity became kind of a featured focus a little bit more recently. Started out doing it from the inside and in the nonprofit community, and then did it in a corporate setting. And for the past almost 19 years, I've been doing it as an external consultant. And I've never focused on a particular industry or profession or geography. So for better or worse, I've worked with a bunch of different organizations, really big organizations, Unilevers, John Deere's, Walmart's, Marriott's, really small organizations, nonprofits, government entities. Most of my clients have been medium to large corporations, but kind of all over the place. And so one of the things that I would say, I think this work is horribly misunderstood today. And one of the things that I would say is that regardless of whether I have any competence or qualification for the work at all, there's not a lot of people in the world that have had direct access to more workplace DEI efforts than I have. And none of those people are the people that have been talking the most and the loudest about this work over the past 2 years. Those people don't know what workplace DEI efforts are. They know what they've been told, they know what they've heard, but they've never actually seen it. They've never been there. And so I believe, as someone who has been directly involved with a whole bunch of workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, that most of, at least America, what they believe to be DEI is almost the opposite of what is actually true about DEI. The narrative has been so disingenuous. I mean, there's always been a certain amount of confusion, and there's been a certain amount of inconsistency in language and things like that. And it's a young profession. Some of that is just normal. But there's also been a tremendous amount of misinformation and disinformation. I think the shared understanding of it is so upside down that I think the acronym DEI is almost just a meaningless at this point in time. And at least in this country, I hear people on both sides of the culture war flinging that word at each other as an insult. So that's kind of the state of where things are. So even to have just a logical, meaningful conversation about the same thing is difficult today. It's always been difficult. We've always been a little bit sloppy with how we use some of those words, but it's at a different place. Truth, meaning, language, those things, we have a different relationship with those things today than we did a few years ago. But I feel that I'm lucky, and unfortunately, I feel like that work is kind of over. I feel like that's not really what I am anymore. I'm trying to figure out what is next. But I consider myself very fortunate to have found a body of work that I believed in. I was kind of professionally miserable a fair amount of my time before finding this body of work. I believed in it. I felt like I had a little bit of ability. Like, I can't say enough about the people that I've met in this work. Not only have I worked with a lot of DEI efforts, but I now have this large network of people that are involved in this work, and they're just some of the most fantastic people that I've come across, and they've been so supportive. I'm a person that's had so much to learn coming into this profession. They've been so supportive and so encouraging and so honest and so careful with me, that I feel badly about the state of this work and the state of those folks. I do think this work will come out better on the other side, whatever we call it and whoever does it, because this is testing it. And some of it needs to be tested. I do believe we're going to come out better on the other side. I just don't know if that's 6 weeks from now or 6 months or 6 decades. So that makes it hard to plan for the future. But there's not a lot of things going on center stage right now, but I am encouraged by some of the things that are going on in quiet places and thoughtful places. I do think there's a lot of important things going on. I'm sorry, that's a really long rant.
No, and and it's great because it really provides an overall context, which, I mean, you'd have to be living under a rock to not know, what are these ripples that are happening, particularly in the US.
Interesting times.
Very interesting times. And you might have said it already, but I don't want to skip over this just because you might not have said it in quite the way that you might want to. But because of this front row seat of these changes, and in many ways, as you alluded to, the retreat of DEI in corporate America, from where you sit, what is actually happening right now?
I think I have little bits and pieces to answer that question. I don't know that I really feel like I have a strong sense, just because 3 or 4 years ago, I think I had a strong sense because I had a strong sense of the state of the work and the people doing the work, because I felt like we were more well connected. That group of folks there's been a lot of heat and pressure and stress. There's a lot of those folks that have lost their jobs. Some of them have lost their business. Some of them are in bankruptcy. Some of them have come under public attack. Some of them have been put on public hit lists. Like, they've gone through some bizarre things. And the folks that are still in kind of those CDO roles in corporate America, they spend most of their time talking to lawyers. Everything that is said, that is written, that is considered related to this stuff has to be vetted and proved and run through a lot of stuff. They spend the vast majority of their time trying to avoid violating some very confusing and political policies and expectations from the government. A lot of the folks that are in external roles, some of them have left the work completely. Some of them probably needed to leave the work. A lot of them have been, on one level or another, rebranding, refreshing, repackaging, using different language, or focusing on specific issues. If that stuff keeps parts of the work alive, I think those are good things. I think at some point in time, we can't avoid the issue that if language is going to be taken away from us, it doesn't matter ultimately what we call it. So if we're going to allow language to be taken from us, these new names that we come up with, we shouldn't get too attached to them, because we've proven that it's okay for people to take language away from us. So I don't think that's a long-term solution, and I'm pretty committed to that longer term, figuring some of that stuff out. How do we take that language back? How do we take better care of it? We were using good words. We didn't take very good care of them, and some other people took them, and they've now defined them. And that's how you get to a place where people believe a profession is almost exactly the opposite of what it's actually about. You lose control of the language, you lose control of truth. So that's a tricky thing to figure out. Like, I get lost in that. I don't know that I have the brain power to figure that out. I try to find smart people to talk through it with, but I think that's significant. And I think that's an issue. That's a humanity thing. Yeah. That's a society thing. That's a civilization thing. That's a survival sustainability thing. So it is big and it's complex. I don't know how to find my way through that. More of us need to be working there, but it's strange work at the same time.
I mean, it's so nuanced, so much of this as well, because I think we talked about it the last time we spoke. There were different levels to the buy-in, I think, of anything related to DEI and ESG and these initiatives within work. There's a question of, is it just box ticking? Is it something that people claim to be doing for the wrong reasons? And then, it's more in Portuguese, you say for the English to see, para inglês ver. And it's sort of, we're just doing it for show. But, we don't actually buy into it. And I just wonder, what is your thought on, when you look at this backlash, what could it actually reveal about how deeply organizations ever truly believed in this work?
Yeah, I don't think any of that's positive. I think one of the things that I struggle with is that this has completely recalibrated my understanding of corporate America. It's not what I thought it was. And that's not just specific to DEI. We can take DEI completely out of the conversation. We can take a look at the very real challenge of climate change. We can take a look at our current insane relationship with technology. These people, these organizations, some of the most powerful, wealthy entities on the planet aren't doing anything that they aren't forced to do. There's a few exceptions. I'm making some generalizations here, but not a lot. There's organizations that say things, but that's a huge difference from what organizations actually do. It's much bigger than I realized. I always knew there was a gap there. I had no concept of the gap. The gap is huge. And I'm not trying to say that corporate America is filled with more dishonest people than I thought it was. I don't think the problem is dishonest people. I think the problem is the context that we put people in. I think corporate America is a system that incentivizes really, really bad things. And I think people in those systems find ways to justify doing that. I think human beings are really good at that. I'm not blaming the individuals. The individuals involved are of all shapes and sizes and all different character and all different values. I'm talking about the systems that we've built, the technology that we use. Corporations are a form of technology. There's something we invented. And we act like there's nothing that we can do about it. Like corporations are just this thing that exists and we have to deal with it. And that's not reality. We created corporations and we can change our relationship with them. And I don't see any interest or energy for that fight. I don't see anybody even really talking about it. I know this isn't a private conversation. This isn't the place for me to be super transparent, but I'm starting to get concerned about even having these conversations with people because I feel like I'm going a little bit crazy because these things seem like they're really big issues. I don't feel like we're freaking out about some of them as much as we have to be. I don't think corporate America as a system cares at all about human beings. And human beings are pretty good at justifying their behavior inside those systems, and they're rewarded for doing that. I mean, Meta is a corporation that is extracting massive amounts of value from this country, maybe globally, but the impact on our civic connection, on our mental well-being, they are printing money as they extract it, and they only want to do it faster. They're only trying to do it faster. That's just not sustainable.
And I just wonder, sort of back to specifically DEI, because I've got some strong feelings about it as well, because, if we're talking about what DEI is, basically it's just saying that a group of people who come from different places and think differently are better than a homogeneous group of people to solve a problem, essentially, right? Okay, I'm simplifying it a lot, but it's sort of, if we just hire a whole lot of people who look the same and come from a similar background, that is one option. And then another option is, let's have a group of people that come together in an organization and on purpose ensuring that those people are coming from a variety of different backgrounds. And of course, there's more to it than that, but I just wonder, where do you think DEI went off track? How is that considered a bad thing? Almost like illegal.
Illegal in some places.
Which is bonkers.
It is bonkers. That's not even a big enough word, but I don't know what the right word is. It's a hard thing to even name. It's absurd. It's an absurdity. We're living in an absurd time. at least in this country. I don't know exactly how it happened. I know part of it was we didn't take real good care of that language. But the way that you asked the question was, where did you think DEI went off track? I don't think that DEI ever went off track. I don't think that DEI ever got the track laid down. I think that's the work that it was doing. I think this idea that DEI was this all-powerful behemoth that had been around forever, that's ludicrous. This body of work is in its infancy. It's a baby, and it's not even a cohesive body of work. I mean, there's so many different things under the banner of DEI. There's people that have done compliance work and call it DEI. There's people that do assimilation work and call it DEI. There's bias, there's performance stuff. There's a lot of different stuff lumped together under this band of DEI, and it hadn't been around very long. I would say, DEI, the way that I was doing it and the way that a lot of the folks that I know are doing, it's a profession that's been around a couple of decades, and it was never very big, and it was never fully funded. If you ask me what the state of this work was 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said DEI practitioners and leaders are exhausted. They're stressed out. They're isolated in their organization. They're misunderstood. There's someone in their organization that's angry their job exists, that doesn't even know them. They don't have access to their boss. They have a complicated relationship with HR. They don't have access to data that they need to use a job. That was 3 or 4 years ago when DEI was supposedly peaking and in its heyday. It was never all powerful. Did it have a little bit of swagger for a couple of months? Did it have a little bit of extra money? Yeah, but it was chronically underfunded and undersupported. This thing of DEI that people talk about, it's this big compared to HR that is this big, in management that is this big, and they've been around for a century. There's entire schools of business and there's entire programs out there. These are established, much larger professions. And they happen to be the two professions that didn't take very good care of DEI, which is ironic because DEI is kind of a corrective to two professions that claim to be about human beings, but don't know anything about human beings. It's a little response on a few different levels, but I don't think DEI ever went off track. Were there some silly things done and said in the name of DEI? I have no doubt. That's also true of education and social work and law enforcement and government. Silly things happen in all of those places. And I don't think that DEI had it all figured out for sure. I think a lot of the stuff that we were doing didn't have a big impact. I think some of it was counterproductive, but that's where a body of work starts. You start somewhere and you experiment and you try some things. I think there wasn't enough experimentation, but we also had these people in a weird situation where they really couldn't afford to make any mistakes because they barely had any support or resources to work with anyway.
Yeah.
So everybody was just trying to run ERGs and everybody was trying to have a council and everybody was trying to do this as these kind of accepted best practices. There's never been any DEI best practices. It hasn't been around long enough to do that.
No, totally. You've been living in this. So your viewpoint and experience is obviously so much more nuanced. As a complete outsider, sort of looking in, and the frustrations that I've felt again with all of these things, CSR, ESG, DEI, sort of becomes like a token kind of thing. And, it's doing it just for the sake of doing it, or doing it because we want to just, we need to just, it's a lack of understanding, like the reason behind this. Why are we doing this? Is the education there within businesses, and who is responsible for this? Is it HR, talent? Who is it that is responsible for this? But there is an element of it, and coming back to my very simplified version of this, it's this lack of understanding that this is not about box ticking. This is about, we need to have a variety of people within a business, because if we don't, we're not as competitive. And I think it's like anything. If we are just doing something, it's the same thing with the climate change debate. If people just think that they're doing things because we have to do this because it's like what we're supposed to do. Well, also, people aren't going to want to work for you if they think that you're destroying the planet. Or if you don't have a planet, you're not going to have a business to be able to run. It's understanding that there's a real business driver to this. I guess my question, and perhaps I'm leading you, but kind of back to the DEI going off track. What was that clear enough to the majority of people in business? Is that something that needs to somehow be rebranded and then not called DEI, but something else, but at least it starts getting into the right channels so that people actually understand why this is a really important thing?
I think the problem is that we look at DEI as the problem for that, or we look at ESG as the problem for that. I think the problem for that is that we've created an entity that we have to convince to take seriously things that are serious to human beings.
Yeah.
I don't want to support an entity that can amass power and wealth, that I have to make a business case that it has to care about the planet, that it should be a good citizen on this planet, that it shouldn't knowingly harm individuals or nature. That doesn't seem crazy to me, but it's totally at odds. You can run around in corporate America today and you can talk about inclusion and you can talk about ethics and you can talk about sustainability, but you're going to have to convince people and you're going to have to make a business case. You have to justify talking about that. You do not have to justify in corporate America talking about nothing but how do we make more money. You do not have to justify that. You don't have to make a business case. You're not going to get called out for that. From my perspective, that's where the problem lies. I think we're looking in the wrong places. We created DEI as some kind of fix, and we played these little games that they let us play. And I think the structure is designed in a way that it is problematic for us as human beings.
Okay, so really, I want to hang on that now because this has a lot to do with the work that this is what I wrote my book on, and this is sort of the area that I work in as well. And I really want to just understand this from you. You're talking about the need to return to fundamentals and to make this work more human centric. Not even the work human centric, making businesses more human centric. It's sort of businesses have lost their way. It's not focusing on the human. It's literally just focusing on money, and everything else is secondary, is an afterthought. What does this then mean to you? What does this look like then?
I don't have a neat, simple answer to that, but you use the language human-centric. I think that's part of it. I think I'm interested in helping leaders create spaces, places, teams, organizations that are human-centric and human-informed. I don't think that most workplaces today are either of those things. I don't think that the professions of management or HR are human-centric or human-informed. That doesn't mean that some of the people doing those jobs aren't human-centric. There's some HR people and some leaders that I know that love human beings. And some of them have some real expertise and insight into human nature, into human behavior. But as professions, they don't. You don't have to know anything about human beings. I'll never forget this project. I worked on a project for a very big company, and I did a bunch of interviews in advance. And the last person that I spoke of was the person that was the farthest up in the organization. Incredibly smart person. Incredibly smart. And at the end of the conversation, and this person is in charge of like 300 other people. At the end of this conversation, he says, I just wish I cared as much about people as I do about robots. And I'm super glad that he told me that. And I know he meant it. And it might have been a moment of like poor judgment. He might have regretted telling me that, but I'm glad that he told me that. I'm glad that he knows that about himself. But it's also indicative to me that that's not a person that should be in charge of 3,000 human beings. I think there's another way to use that person's intelligence and competence. I think if you're going to be in charge of human beings or you're going to support them in a profession called human resources, there should be some real education and development around what do we know about human beings and human behavior and human nature. And what scares me is that most HR people and most leaders that I know don't have any interest in that information. They're not aware of it. They don't have any interest. They haven't read the books. They're not going to the conferences. They don't know there's journals and research going on. It's just a huge disconnect. Maybe I'm the weirdo, but that just makes no sense to me. And I think that's a big part of how we've built organizations, that we've all just accepted this organization exists to provide profit to these people. Like that, you can't have an entity that exists for that sole purpose. Like that's completely unsustainable. There's got to be more to it than that. And it's got to be anchored in humanity and the world in which we exist. I don't think those are radical or even political things, but they seem to be at odds with where we're at today. So I think there's an opportunity for some of us to start some new conversations and to start experimenting with some new practices.
Yeah. And I feel so much of this is around positioning It's around, finding our allies. It's finding the people who get this and understand, because anything that we're going to do, there has to be a value connected to it. And I agree with you that a business cannot just be focused on profit and that you're constantly having to make a business case. But even in the case of, what I'm focusing on, which is the importance of people tapping into their human assets, understanding the importance of human competencies, a team that understands these dynamics. Well, the business case is, I personally would not be at my best if I'm working in a place that I don't feel psychologically safe, that I don't feel that people give a shit about me, that I don't feel that I'm expected to basically kill myself over work, and no one even cares about the fact that I have children or the fact that I have a life outside of work. And that's not sustainable. And I won't continue working for a place like that. And
Right.
at the end of the day, that's going to cost a business money. So there is, I think there's always the business case. Yes, it would be great if people were actually thoughtful and did this for other reasons. And I would like to think that there are leaders out there who do that. But I think if we're talking about the positioning, or if we're talking about the business case, and I mentioned this the last time that we spoke, I love, and this is for all our listeners, anyone who's listening, if you're interested in this and you're wanting to know like the real business case for this, Matthew Syed's book, Rebel Ideas, is amazing. And it was recommended to me by a friend of mine in London. I read it and oh my God, I just, I could not, I read it so quickly just because it was just, I was like, oh my goodness, this is it. This is explaining why this is so important in so many different contexts. And my business tie, we talk a lot about the fact that, complexity demands diversity of thought. And Matthew Syed talks a lot about that in his book. What do organizations stand to lose if they abandon this inclusion work now, especially in a world that is growing more volatile and uncertain?
Yeah, well, and I think that book does a great job of answering that question. He gives 25 different examples of the answer to that question. I think what you compromise, and it's a long-term thing, which I think business leaders aren't good at caring about. That's part of our challenge.
Yeah.
But really what they're doing is they're compromising their capacity to respond to an ever-changing world. I think organizations that get good at something and are profitable think that they are an organization of consequence and that they're going to be okay. But being good at something is profoundly different thing than navigating disruption and learning something new. Not a lot of organizations have the ability to do both of those things. An example of that would be, who was the old, I've even forgotten the name, who was the old camera company that went out of business?
Kodak.
Right after they were super profitable and respectful and all of these things, they went out of business, and they went out of business because they became irrelevant. And they became irrelevant by technology that they helped create. The future was right in front of them. They couldn't figure it out. And they were anchored in what they were good at doing, which became much cheaper and less relevant, and they became irrelevant. It looks like what happened to Blockbuster, who used to be innovative and exciting and profitable and respective, and then they became irrelevant. What you do is you compromise your capacity to be a consequential organization, to respond, to adapt to an ever-changing future. You've got to have the ability to learn. You've got to be open to new ideas and information to permeate your organization. I don't even like talking about the business case. I don't even like talking about things like psychological safety anymore because I think it's too academic or consulty language. I just try to talk about very simple logic. Are human beings different? They are, all of us. We're all naturally different from each other. Can those differences lead to good things and bad things? Yeah. They've led to a lot of bad things and they've led to a lot of good things. Seems like me, since we're going to bring a bunch of people together, we should pay attention to that logically. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what the kinds of people are. That seems like a logical thing. If we're going to bring people together that are different, every single human being that we employ is different from every single other human being. We should pay attention to that and try to get the benefits and as little of the bad stuff as possible, just logically. Do we want people that are different from each other to tell each other the truth? That seems like a good thing. You know what? someone in your organization is afraid to tell someone the truth because of the way in which they think it's going to be received, because of their identities and their titles. That happens all the time. I served in the Marine Corps infantry. It happened there. Marine Corps combat tested Marine Corps veterans unwilling to share bad news with their boss because of the way in which they thought it was going to be received. That happens in every organization on the planet. It's happening in organizations right now. That's a diversity issue. That happens because of differences in identity and power and perceptions and ideas about what the consequences are going to be. If you want people to tell the truth to each other, that takes hard work. And most organizations aren't doing that work. And so they have groups of really smart individuals that avoid serious disagreement at all costs because they don't know how to do it, which means they don't tell the full truth to each other. And that's how you have Codex, and that's how you have blockbusters, and that's how you have space shuttles blow up, and that's how you have, I think Rebel Ideas is one of the books that does a fantastic job of explaining the backstory of how the United States government was pretty well positioned to stop
Totally.
9/11. They had a lot of the information, but it was stuck over here, and it was stuck over here, and it was stuck over here. Individual lines of difference prevented that stuff, trust and information from moving. That stuff happens all the time. It's super easy to survive today, but in the long term, it puts an expiration date on your organization. You're compromising your ability to learn and adapt and respond to an ever-changing world. If you care about the long term, there's no business case that needs to be made. It's obvious, it's logical, but we've got some work to do. And I think a lot of the work is in the language and the narratives and the metaphors that we use. And that's different than a lot of the work that we've been doing. So it's going to require some different folks.
Do you have a story that you can share? Because I'm really curious to know. I mean, like you say, you're in contact with so many different people from this area. I can't even imagine if, when you're drinking a beer or coffee or tea or whatever, kombucha or whatever, and you're sort of hanging out with your colleagues when the microphones are off, what those conversations, I would love to be a fly on the wall. What are you hearing behind closed doors right now? Do you have anything that you can share with us?
A little bit of everything. I think of the people doing the work. I think there's some folks out there that they've got an ongoing business or enough clients, or they've rebranded enough that they're financially decent and they're doing the work. And I think those folks are hopeful. I think most of those folks have made some small changes to their work. I think some of them will probably make some bigger changes down the road. I think there's a lot of folks that have left the work or are thinking about leaving the work. Like I have quite a few folks that were doing DEI in corporate roles a year or two ago that are doing coaching now, or that are moving towards coaching, that are doing more speaking or writing around some related issues, some different issues. Corporate folks I think nobody wants to draw any attention to themselves on either side. They don't want people to think they're doing it because they're afraid of the attention. They don't want people to think they're not doing it. I think the whole conversation's crazy making in corporate spaces. We have a government that could come out and say literally anything about DEI tomorrow, and we all know that. And so it's hard to even know what to tell clients, because even if some of these things obviously are not going to stand up in court, but even if some of these things don't stand up in court, it's still a real thing for an owner of a business to get a letter from the White House or the FBI or that's a real thing that has real consequences. And I think if you're a business owner, regardless of your commitment to this work, when you're thinking about protecting your business and protecting your people, that makes you step back and say, we can only do stuff that's quiet and low profile, or we can't do anything right now. I think there's a lot of that going on too, which isn't sustainable. So I don't know. I think parts of the work have been stopped. Parts of the work have been set back years and decades. I think there's parts of the work that are sneaking and finding ways forward and are going to blow up in the future. I think there's a lot of different things going on a lot of different levels. I think there's going to be a lot of probably technology and data coming into this work. I think we were super slow to get to that anyway, but I don't know what it's going to look like.
What does resilient, courageous leadership look like right now in this? Because I mean, there's a lot on the line, right? And it's hard to put your neck out, but at the same time, what does that look like right now?
I think there's a couple of things that I look at. I look at the people of Minneapolis who have endured some real difficult
Yeah, God.
hardship over the past couple of months, and a lot of that leadership was I don't even know what to call it. It was very close to home. People got close, right? People in the neighborhoods. They stayed together.
Yeah.
They looked each other in the eye. They walked with each other. They talked to each other. They knew each other. I think that is, maybe leadership's not the right word, but I think we need a lot more of that. I think we need that in corporate America. I think
Yeah.
leaders need to get close to their people. They need to know their people. They need to talk to their people, look each other in the eye, build those trusting and resilient relationships. We're far too easily divided, and we're way too divided already. And we don't have nearly as much power when we're divided. It's going to get, I think, harder and harder to know what and who to trust. So those eyeball to eyeball,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's part of it. I think we need a lot more of that. And I don't think we've done that in business, in our neighborhoods. I think we need more of that everywhere we can find it, more connectivity. That's naturally resilient. And then I think we also need the loud kind of leadership, and it's kind of missing.
God, it comes down to humanity,
It's kind of
it's the humanity. It's the I'm here for you. It's the connection. It's the belonging. It's the you can count on me. I'm here and I'm going to stand up. And
I think we need some loud people too to be reminding us of our shared humanity. There's no big differences. The differences are all small. Like the commonality is the big thing. We're all human beings. There's tremendous similarity. And I don't see a lot of leaders with big platforms reminding us of calling us back together. It's all about us, them, we, they, different narratives. Everything is divided. And I don't think we fix anything that way.
Can you leave our listeners with a belief or an idea or maybe a quote from someone else or a truth that sums up what we've talked about?
Be good to yourself and be good to each other. We need to take better care of each other.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to tell our listeners?
Well, I don't know. You haven't asked me my favorite color, my zodiac sign, none of the regular ones. No, I'm just kidding. I've probably overspoken anyway. So
You have not at all. This has been really powerful. And I appreciate your honesty and authenticity and courage at this moment in time to be so truthful, which many people are not able to. I've tried to have this conversation before, and there's people who just won't have it. So I really, 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 really appreciate it. Until the next time.
thank you.